The blood on her dress had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time Eliza Morgan stumbled into Deadwood, Dakota Territory on that scorching July afternoon in 1876, clutching her side where the stagecoach bandit's bullet had grazed her ribs 3 days prior. She had been traveling from Cheyenne with nothing but a carpetbag and the deed to her late uncle's mining claim when the outlaws attacked, killing the driver and leaving the passengers to fend for themselves in the Badlands. Eliza had walked for 2 days straight through the heat, rationing the single canteen of water she'd salvaged, watching the wound on her side grow angrier and more inflamed with each passing hour. By the time she reached the muddy main street of Deadwood, her skin was burning with fever, her vision swimming in and out of focus, and her legs could barely hold her upright. The town was a chaotic sprawl of hastily constructed buildings, canvas tents, and crowds of prospectors, gamblers, and opportunists who had flooded the Black Hills after gold was discovered. The July heat was oppressive, made worse by the lack of trees and the dust that hung in the air like a choking fog. Eliza's boots dragged through the mud and muck as she made her way toward a building with a painted sign that read, Dr. Nathaniel Crane, Physician. She pushed through the door and nearly collapsed against the examination table. A thin man with spectacles and graying hair looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. Eliza knew she must look like hell, her traveling dress torn and filthy, her dark hair matted with sweat and falling from its pins, her face flushed with fever. "Please," she managed, her voice hoarse. "I need help. I've been shot." Dr. Crane stood slowly, walking around his desk to examine her with cold, assessing eyes. He didn't move to help her, didn't reach for his medical bag. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest and regarded her with barely concealed disdain. "You come from the stagecoach robbery," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, 3 days ago. The wound is infected, and I have a fever. I need treatment." The doctor's lips pressed into a thin line. "I heard about that robbery. They say a woman matching your description was seen riding with those outlaws before they scattered. They say you might have been part of the gang." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. "That's not true. I was a passenger. They shot me when I tried to run." "So you say." "Doctor." Crane walked back to his desk and sat down, returning his attention to the ledger in front of him. "I don't treat criminals or their associates. Even if you're telling the truth, I have no proof of it. I have a reputation to maintain in this town, and I won't risk it on someone who might bring the law down on my practice." "I'm not a criminal," Eliza said, her voice breaking. "Please, I'm burning up. I need help. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Patterson might rent you a room if you have coin. Beyond that, you're on your own." He didn't even look up from his ledger. "Now, get out of my office before I call the sheriff and let him sort out whether you're telling the truth." The dismissal was absolute. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to plead, but the room was spinning around her and she could barely stand. She stumbled back out into the brutal afternoon sun, leaning against the building's exterior wall to catch her breath. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, and she knew she was in serious trouble. If the infection didn't kill her, the fever would. She forced herself to move, dragging herself in the direction the doctor had indicated. The boarding house was a 2-story structure that looked slightly more permanent than most of the buildings in Deadwood. Eliza climbed the steps with agonizing slowness and knocked on the door. A stout woman with steel-gray hair answered, taking one look at Eliza and shaking her head. "We don't take charity cases." "I can pay," Eliza said, fumbling in her pocket for the few coins she had left. "I just need a room, please." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly, though suspicion still lingered in her eyes. "You look half dead already. I don't need bodies in my establishment. It's bad for business." "I won't die in your room," Eliza said, though she wasn't sure she could keep that promise. "I just need somewhere to rest." The woman sighed and took the coins. "One night, upstairs, last door on the right. There's a basin and pitcher. Don't bleed on my linens." Eliza managed to climb the stairs, though she had to stop twice to rest. The room was small and sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. She collapsed onto the bed without even removing her boots, her body shaking with chills despite the oppressive heat. She tried to remove her dress to examine the wound, but her fingers were clumsy and weak. The fever was getting worse. She could feel it burning through her like wildfire. She must have passed out because the next thing she knew, the room was darker, and someone was knocking on the door. Eliza tried to call out, but her throat was too dry. The door opened anyway, and a figure stepped inside. "Ma'am, Mrs. Patterson said there was a sick woman up here who might need help." The voice was male, deep and rough-edged, but not unkind. Eliza forced her eyes open and saw a tall man silhouetted against the lamplight from the hallway. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a dark shirt, and a hat that shadowed his face. As he moved closer, she could make out more details. A strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, dark eyes that held a mixture of concern and wariness, sun-weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. "Who are you?" Eliza managed to whisper. "Name's Cole Brennan. I'm a wrangler, just brought a herd up from Texas. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you'd been turned away by the doctor, said you looked like you might not make it through the night." He crouched beside the bed, and Eliza could see his face more clearly now. He looked to be in his late 20s, with the lean, muscular build of a man who made his living working with horses and cattle. His expression was serious as he studied her fevered face. "She's not wrong. You're burning up." "The doctor wouldn't help me," Eliza said, her words slurring together. "Thinks I'm an outlaw." "Are you?" "No." Cole was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he nodded, as if coming to a decision. "All right then, let's see if we can get that fever down before it cooks your brain." He stood and walked to the washstand, pouring water from the pitcher into the basin. Eliza tried to sit up, but the movement sent a lance of pain through her side and she gasped. Cole was beside her in an instant, his hand gentle but firm on her shoulder. "Easy now. Don't move too fast. Where are you hurt?" "My side," Eliza said. "Bullet graze. It's infected." Cole's expression darkened. "I need to see it. Can you manage to get your dress open, or do you need help?" Under any other circumstances, Eliza would have been mortified at the suggestion, but she was too sick to care about propriety. She tried to reach for the buttons, but her hands were shaking too badly. Cole, seeing her struggle, moved with careful respect. "I'm going to help you sit up and get this dress loosened so I can see the wound. I promise I'll be as proper about it as I can." His hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her into a sitting position and worked the buttons of her dress. He was true to his word, exposing only her left side where the wound was located. Eliza heard his sharp intake of breath when he saw it. "That's nasty," he said quietly. "Red and swollen, infection spreading out from the center. No wonder you're fevered." He looked up at her face. "This is going to hurt, but I need to clean it out. Can you handle that?" Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole moved quickly, retrieving the basin of water and tearing a strip from the sheet. He paused, then pulled a flask from his vest pocket. "Whiskey," he explained. "Best thing I've got for cleaning wounds out here. Bite down on this." He handed her a leather strap from his saddlebag. "Trust me, you'll want it." Eliza took the strap, placing it between her teeth. Cole poured whiskey over the wound, and she nearly screamed, the burning pain cutting through the fog of fever. He worked quickly, using the wet cloth to clean away the pus and infection, his movements practiced and sure. When he finally stepped back, Eliza was sobbing, tears streaming down her fevered cheeks. "Worst part's done," Cole said, his voice gentle. He pulled out a clean handkerchief and folded it into a pad, pressing it against the wound. "Hold this here while I tear more bandages." He worked efficiently, wrapping her torso with strips of clean cloth to hold the dressing in place. Then he helped her lie back down and arranged the dress to preserve her modesty as much as possible. "The infection was bad," he said, "but I think I got most of it cleaned out. The fever's the problem now. Your body's fighting hard, and you're cooking from the inside out." He wet a cloth in the basin and wrung it out, then placed it on her forehead. The cool water felt like heaven against her burning skin. "Why are you helping me?" Eliza asked. "You don't know me." Cole shrugged, but there was something in his eyes that suggested the answer wasn't as simple as he wanted to make it seem. "Let's just say I've been in a tight spot or two myself, and I know what it's like when nobody will help you. Besides, I don't think you're an outlaw. You've got soft hands, educated speech. You're not the type who rides with bandits." "How do you know?" "I've met plenty of outlaws. You don't have to look." He dipped the cloth in the water again and replaced it on her forehead. "What's your name?" "Eliza Morgan." "Well, Miss Morgan, I'm going to stay here tonight and keep you from burning up. That fever needs to come down, and somebody's got to keep changing these cloths to cool you off." "You can't stay in my room all night," Eliza protested weakly. It wouldn't be proper. Proper won't mean much if you're dead by morning, Cole said bluntly. Besides, I'll sit in the chair by the door. Anyone who comes checking will see I'm being a gentleman about it. Eliza wanted to argue, but she didn't have the strength. Her eyes drifted closed as Cole's strong hands worked, replacing the cloth on her forehead with a freshly cooled one. She could hear him moving around the room, the splash of water, the creak of the chair as he settled into it. "Sleep if you can," his voice came from near the door. "I'll keep watch." The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of fever dreams and brief moments of lucidity. Each time Eliza surfaced from the burning darkness, Cole was there, changing the cloth on her forehead, helping her drink water, checking the bandage on her side. His presence was constant, steady, a rock in the midst of the storm raging through her body. At some point in the deepest part of the night, the fever spiked even higher. Eliza was delirious, thrashing on the bed, her skin so hot that Cole's cool cloths seemed to evaporate against it almost instantly. He moved the chair closer to the bed and worked without stopping, cooling cloth after cloth in the basin, draping them over her forehead, her wrists, her neck, anywhere he could reach. When the water in the pitcher ran out, he left the room long enough to refill it from the pump downstairs, then returned and continued his vigil. "Please don't die," Eliza heard him murmur at one point, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I didn't pull you back from the edge just to lose you now." She tried to tell him she was fighting, that she wasn't ready to give up, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt his hand close around hers, warm and solid and real, anchoring her to the world when everything else felt like it was slipping away. Sometime before dawn, the fever finally broke. Eliza woke to find herself drenched in sweat, her clothes and the sheets beneath her soaked through, but her head felt clearer than it had in days. The room was gray with pre-dawn light, and Cole was slumped in the chair beside her bed, his eyes closed, one hand still resting near hers on the mattress. He looked exhausted, his face drawn, his clothes rumpled. The basin beside him was full of used cloths, and the floor around the chair was wet where water had splashed. He'd done exactly what he'd promised. He'd stayed up all night, cooling her burning skin, fighting the fever with nothing but water and determination. Eliza watched him sleep for a moment, taking in the strong lines of his face, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the gentleness in his features that his rough exterior couldn't quite hide. This man, this stranger, had saved her life when the town doctor had turned her away. He'd spent the entire night caring for her, asking nothing in return. "Cole," she whispered, her voice hoarse but stronger than it had been. His eyes opened immediately, alert despite his exhaustion. When he saw that she was awake and lucid, relief washed over his face. "The fever broke," he said, reaching out to touch her forehead with the back of his hand. His touch was gentle, almost tender. "Thank God. I was starting to worry. You stayed all night." "Told you I would." He stood and stretched, his joints popping. "How do you feel?" "Weak, sore, but better." Eliza tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through her side. Cole was there instantly, helping her, supporting her weight with his arm. "Easy. That wound's going to hurt for a while yet. You lost some blood, and the infection took a lot out of you. You need rest and food." "I need to thank you," Eliza said, looking up at him. "You saved my life." Cole looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone decent would have done the same. But they didn't. The doctor wouldn't even look at me. You did more than anyone could have asked. She paused, studying his face. "Why did you really help me, Cole?" He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he sighed and sat back down in the chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "About 5 years ago, I got caught up in something that wasn't my fault," he said quietly. "Wrong place, wrong time. A bank got robbed in a town I was passing through, and because I was a stranger, they decided I must be involved. The sheriff threw me in jail, and nobody would listen when I said I was innocent. I spent 3 weeks locked up before the real robbers got caught in another town and confessed. 3 weeks of people looking at me like I was garbage, treating me like a criminal when I hadn't done anything wrong." He looked up at her, and Eliza could see old pain in his eyes. "I know what it's like to be judged unfairly, to need help and have everyone turn their backs. When Mrs. Patterson told me about you, about the doctor refusing to treat you because of some rumor, I couldn't just walk away. Maybe you were innocent like you said, maybe you weren't, but either way, you deserved a chance. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. I was innocent. I am innocent. I'm not an outlaw, Cole. I was just trying to get to Deadwood to claim my uncle's mining property. He died 6 months ago and left it to me. The stagecoach was supposed to be safe passage. Nothing's really safe out here, Cole said, especially not for a woman traveling alone. What about family? Husband? No husband. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my aunt in Philadelphia. She passed last year. Uncle James was my only remaining family, and I never even met him. He left me his claim in his will, and I thought maybe I could start fresh out here, build something of my own. She laughed bitterly. I didn't expect to nearly die within days of arriving. Deadwood's a hard town, Cole said. But there's opportunity here, too, if you're tough enough to take it. You've got grit, Miss Morgan. Not many people could have walked for 2 days through the Badlands with an infected wound and still be alive to tell the tale. I had a reason to keep going, Eliza said. That mine claim is all I have left in the world. It's my chance at a future. Cole nodded slowly. What are you going to do now? You're in no shape to work a mine, and even if you were, this town isn't exactly welcoming to women prospectors. I don't know, Eliza admitted, but I'll figure something out. I have to. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Patterson's voice called out, Miss Morgan, I'm coming in. The boarding house owner opened the door and stopped short when she saw Cole still in the room. Her eyes narrowed, but when she saw the pile of wet cloths and the exhausted look on Cole's face, her expression softened. You stayed all night, she said, and it wasn't quite a question. The fever was bad, Cole said simply. She needed someone to keep it down. Mrs. Patterson walked over to the bed and felt Eliza's forehead herself. Fever's broken. You did good work, Mr. Brennan. Better than that useless doctor would have done, truth be told. She sniffed disapprovingly. Nathaniel Crane's always been more concerned with his reputation than with actually helping people. You're lucky this cowboy has more compassion in his little finger than Crane has in his whole body. I know, Eliza said quietly. I owe him my life. Well, you need food and rest now, Mrs. Patterson said briskly. I'll bring up some broth and bread, and you, she turned to Cole, need to go get some sleep yourself. You look dead on your feet. Cole stood, swaying slightly. Eliza realized he must be completely exhausted. I'll come back later, he said to Eliza. Check on how you're doing. You don't have to, Eliza said, though she found herself hoping he would anyway. I want to. Cole picked up his hat from where it had been hanging on the back of the chair and settled it on his head. Besides, someone needs to help you figure out what to do about that mine claim. Can't have you dying in the Badlands after I went to all that trouble keeping you alive. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he said it, and Eliza found herself smiling back despite everything. Thank you, Cole, for everything. He tipped his hat to her and left, his boots heavy on the stairs. Mrs. Patterson watched him go, then turned back to Eliza with a knowing look. That's a good man, she said. Hard to find these days, especially in a place like this. He barely knows me, Eliza said. He's just being kind. Maybe. Mrs. Patterson moved around the room, gathering up the wet cloths and straightening the chair. Or maybe he sees something in you worth saving. Either way, you could do worse than having Cole Brennan on your side in this town. He's got a reputation for being honest and fair, and people respect him. That means something in Deadwood. She left to get the food, and Eliza lay back against the pillows, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She thought about Cole's hands, gentle as they cooled her burning skin. She thought about his voice in the darkness, steady and reassuring. She thought about the way he'd looked at her when the fever finally broke, the relief in his eyes as real as if he'd known her for years instead of hours. She barely knew him, and yet he'd saved her life without hesitation. What kind of man did that for a complete stranger? Over the next several days, Eliza slowly regained her strength. Mrs. Patterson, who had initially seemed reluctant to help, proved to be a competent caretaker, bringing meals and checking on the wound to make sure it was healing properly. But it was Cole who Eliza found herself looking forward to seeing each day. He came by every morning and evening, usually bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, some fresh fruit he'd managed to find at the general store, a small bunch of wildflowers that made her smile. They talked for hours, and Eliza learned more about the man who had saved her life. Cole had been born in Missouri, the youngest of 3 brothers. His family had been farmers, but the farm had failed when he was 15, and his parents had died of fever the following winter. His older brothers had gone their separate ways, one heading to California in search of gold, the other settling in Kansas to try farming again. Cole had drifted for a while, taking odd jobs, until he'd found work as a wrangler and discovered he had a natural talent with horses. "Been moving around ever since," he told her one evening as they sat in her room, the window open to let in the cooling air. "Texas, Colorado, Wyoming. Go where the work is, stay as long as it's interesting, then move on. It's not a bad life." "Sounds lonely," Eliza said quietly. Cole shrugged, but she could see she'd touched something true. "Sometimes, but it's also free. No ties, no obligations, just the trail and the next job." "Is that what you want? To keep drifting forever?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I used to think so. Lately, though, I've been wondering if maybe there's something more, something worth settling down for." He looked at her then, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "What about you? What do you want, Eliza?" It was the first time he'd used her given name without the miss in front of it, and the intimacy of it sent a flutter through her chest. "I want a place to belong," she said honestly. "I want to build something that's mine, something that can't be taken away. The mine claim is just land right now, but maybe it could be more. Maybe it could be a real home." "You still planning to work the claim yourself?" "I don't know if I can," Eliza admitted. "I know nothing about mining, and I don't have the money to hire help, but I can't just give it up without trying. It's all I have." Cole leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Where is this claim? Do you have the papers?" Eliza reached for the carpet bag that Mrs. Patterson had retrieved from where she'd dropped it on the street that first day. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, were the deed and a rough map. She handed them to Cole, who studied them carefully. "This is up in the hills, about 5 miles north of town," he said. "Gold Creek area. That's actually decent land. There's been some good strikes up that way." He looked up at her. "You should go see it at least, know what you're dealing with." "I'm not strong enough yet to make that ride. Give it another week. By then you should be able to sit a horse. I'll take you up there myself if you want, help you assess what you've got." "You'd do that?" "Why not? I'm between jobs right now anyway. The herd's been delivered and I haven't signed on with another outfit yet. I've got time." Eliza studied his face, trying to understand why this man kept helping her, kept coming back day after day. "Why are you really doing all this, Cole? And don't tell me it's just because you know what it's like to be judged unfairly. There's more to it than that." Cole met her gaze steadily, and for a moment she thought he might deflect again. But then his expression softened, became more vulnerable than she'd seen before. "Honestly, I don't entirely know. When I first saw you, sick and alone and in need of help, something in me just responded. And then I spent that whole night fighting to keep you alive, and somewhere in those dark hours, you stopped being a stranger. You became someone who mattered." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've spent 5 years drifting, Eliza. 5 years keeping everyone at arm's length, never letting anyone get close. And then you stumbled into Deadwood, and suddenly I find myself wanting to stay, wanting to see what happens next, wanting to know you better." The honesty in his words took her breath away. Eliza had been courted before, back in Philadelphia. There had been a young lawyer who had taken her to dinners and the theater, who had spoken pretty words about her beauty and charm. But he'd disappeared when her aunt died, and it became clear that Eliza had no fortune. His interest had been superficial, calculated. What she saw in Cole's eyes was different. It was real and raw and maybe a little scared, as if he was surprised by his own feelings. "I want to know you better too," she said quietly. "You saved my life, Cole, but more than that, you've been kind when you didn't have to be. You've treated me like I matter, like I'm worth something. I haven't had much of that in my life." Cole reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "You're worth a lot, Eliza Morgan. Anyone who made you feel otherwise was a fool." They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, the evening air cooling the room as the sun set over the chaotic sprawl of Deadwood. It was a strange place to find connection, this wild boomtown full of desperate people chasing impossible dreams. But sometimes, Eliza thought, the best things happened in unexpected places. A week later, Eliza was well enough to travel. The wound on her side had closed and was healing cleanly. The fever was completely gone, and her strength had mostly returned. Cole arrived at the boarding house early in the morning with 2 horses, a gentle mare for Eliza and his own sturdy gelding. "Ready to see your inheritance?" he asked with a smile. Eliza had borrowed a split riding skirt from Mrs. Patterson and tied her hair back in a practical braid. She felt more like herself than she had since arriving in Deadwood, and the prospect of finally seeing the land her uncle had left her filled her with nervous excitement. "Ready?" she said, and let Cole help her into the saddle. They rode out of town as the sun climbed higher, following a rough trail that wound into the pine-covered hills. The air was cooler here, scented with sap and earth, and Eliza breathed deeply, enjoying the escape from Deadwood's crowded, muddy streets. Cole rode beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. "The Black Hills have been sacred to the Lakota Sioux for generations," he explained. "The Treaty of 1868 guaranteed this land to them, but then gold was discovered and prospectors flooded in anyway. There's been conflict, and there's going to be more. The Lakota aren't happy about having their land stolen, and rightfully so." "Did my uncle steal this land?" Eliza asked, troubled by the thought. "The claim's been registered with the territorial government, such as it is," Cole said. "But in a bigger sense, yeah, all of us who came here for gold are taking what doesn't belong to us. It's something I think about, the injustice of it." He shook his head. "There's no easy answer, Eliza. We can't undo what's been done. All we can do is try to be decent about how we move forward." They rode in thoughtful silence for a while, until Cole pulled up his horse at a bend in the trail. "According to your map, the claim should be just up ahead, through those trees." Eliza urged her mare forward, her heart pounding with anticipation. The trees opened up into a clearing beside a small creek, the water clear and cold as it tumbled over smooth stones. On one side of the creek was a rough cabin, weathered but still standing. On the other side was evidence of mining activity. A partially dug shaft, piles of tailings, some basic equipment. "Your uncle was working this alone," Cole said, dismounting and helping Eliza down. "Looks like he made some progress before he died. The shaft's not deep yet, but the location is good. This creek would have shown color. That's probably what made him stake the claim here." Eliza walked slowly around the property, taking it all in. The cabin was small but solid, with a stone fireplace and real glass in one window. Inside, she found basic furniture, a bed frame, a table, a couple of chairs. There were still some of her uncle's possessions scattered around, and she felt a pang of sadness for the man she'd never known. "He lived out here alone," she said softly, "working this claim by himself, with no family nearby. That must have been so lonely." "Maybe that's why he left it to you," Cole said from the doorway. "Maybe he hoped you'd have better luck. Make something of this place that he couldn't." Eliza turned to look at him, silhouetted against the bright sunlight outside. "What do you think, honestly? Is there anything here worth pursuing?" Cole stepped inside and looked around the cabin with a practiced eye. "The location's good. There's water, timber for building and fuel, decent shelter already established. Whether there's enough gold in that claim to make it profitable, that's harder to say. Would take some real digging to know for sure. But even if the gold doesn't pan out, this could be good land for something else. Small ranch maybe, some cattle or horses." "I don't know anything about ranching either," Eliza said with a laugh that was half despair. "You could learn." Cole moved closer to her, his expression serious. "Or you could find a partner who does know, someone who could help you build something here." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Eliza's heart was racing, and she wasn't sure if it was from exertion or from the way Cole was looking at her. "Is that an offer?" she asked quietly. "Maybe." Cole reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting a place to belong. I've been thinking about it a lot, actually, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion." "What's that?" "That I'm tired of drifting. That maybe I've been drifting all this time because I was waiting to find something worth staying for." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, gentle and sure. "Or someone." Eliza's breath caught. "Cole, we barely know each other." "I know. It's crazy, right? A week ago we were strangers, but I spent that first night fighting to keep you alive. And somewhere in those hours, something changed for me. I started to care. And every day since, every conversation we've had, that feeling's just gotten stronger." He paused, searching her face. "Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you feel it too." She did feel it. That was the terrifying, wonderful truth. Despite the short time they'd known each other, despite all the practical reasons why this made no sense, Eliza felt drawn to Cole in a way she'd never experienced before. He was good and steady and real, and when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that went beyond surface appearances. "I feel it," she whispered. "It scares me how much I feel it." Cole smiled, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges and revealing the warmth beneath. "Scares me too, but in a good way, like standing on the edge of something big and knowing the only way forward is to jump." "Is that what we're doing? Jumping?" "I don't know. Maybe we're just taking the first step and seeing where it leads." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Eliza didn't want to. She closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of promise. Cole's arms came around her, careful of her healing wound, holding her close but not too tight. Eliza let herself sink into the kiss, into the feeling of being held by someone who cared, someone who'd proven his devotion in the most fundamental way possible. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So," Cole said, his voice a little rough, "want some help fixing up this cabin? Because if we're going to make something of this claim, we should probably start by making the living quarters actually livable." "We?" Eliza asked, raising an eyebrow. "If you'll have me." Cole's expression turned more serious. "I know we're moving fast. I know this is all happening in a way that probably doesn't make sense to anyone looking from the outside. But I meant what I said, Eliza. I want to stay. I want to see what we can build here, together. If you're willing to take a chance on a drifter cowboy who's never settled in one place for more than a few months." Eliza thought about the alternative. Trying to work this claim alone, struggling in a town where she had no connections and at least one enemy in Dr. Crane. She thought about the long, lonely nights in the boarding house and the uncertain future that stretched ahead of her. And then she thought about Cole staying up all night to cool her fever, his hands gentle and tireless. She thought about the way he made her laugh, the way he listened when she talked, the way he looked at her like she was precious. She thought about how alive she felt when she was with him, how the future suddenly seemed full of possibility instead of just fear. "Yes," she said, "I'm willing. Let's take this chance together." Cole's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Eliza felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that she'd been searching for without even knowing it. They spent the rest of the day at the claim, taking inventory of what was there and what they'd need. The cabin required some repairs to the roof and chinking between the logs, but it was structurally sound. The mining equipment was basic but functional. Cole examined the shaft her uncle had started and the creek bed, his experienced eye assessing the potential. "Your uncle was onto something," he said, showing Eliza the glints of gold in the pan after he'd demonstrated how to work the creek. "This isn't a huge strike, but there's color here. With steady work, you could pull enough out to make a living. Won't make you rich overnight, but it's honest money." Eliza corrected. "Enough to make us a living." Cole grinned. I'm gonna have to get used to thinking in those terms." They returned to Deadwood as the sun was setting, making plans as they rode. Cole would finish settling his affairs in town and gathering supplies. Eliza would close out her room at the boarding house and purchase the tools and materials they'd need. In a few days, they'd move out to the claim and begin the real work of building a life together. It was moving fast, maybe too fast, but it felt right in a way that Eliza couldn't explain and didn't want to question too closely. That night, as Eliza lay in her bed at the boarding house, she found herself thinking about everything that had happened since she'd stumbled into Deadwood burning with fever. She'd been rejected by the doctor who should have helped her, saved by a stranger with no reason to care, and found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. A partner, maybe even love. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Cole proved to be a man of his word, showing up each morning to help Eliza prepare for the move. They purchased supplies together: flour, salt, coffee, beans, and other staples, tools for mining and building, seeds for a small garden. Cole added some things from his own savings: ammunition, a good rifle, blankets, cooking pots. "We'll need to be self-sufficient out there," he explained. "It's 5 miles to town, and in winter that'll be a hard trip. Better to stock up now while we can." "Mrs. Patterson was sorry to see Eliza go. "You're making the right choice," she said, as she helped pack up Eliza's few belongings. Cole Brennan's one of the good ones. Treat him right, and he'll move mountains for you." "He already has," Eliza said softly. On the day of the move, they loaded everything onto a wagon Cole had borrowed and made the journey to the claim. It took most of the day to get everything unloaded and organized. By the time the sun was setting, Eliza was exhausted but happy, standing in the doorway of the cabin and looking out at the land that was now hers, theirs. Cole came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is from what I expected," Eliza said, leaning back against his solid warmth. "A month ago, I was in Philadelphia, packing up my aunt's house and wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake accepting this inheritance. I was so scared of coming west, of being alone in a strange place. And now I'm still in a strange place, but I'm not alone, and somehow that makes all the difference." Cole pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We're going to make this work, Eliza, whatever it takes." They did make it work, though it wasn't easy. The first weeks on the claim were a test of endurance and determination. They fell into a routine, Cole working the mine and hunting for meat, Eliza managing the cabin and starting a garden, both of them learning as they went. There were mistakes and setbacks. The first attempt at reinforcing the mine shaft collapsed and had to be redone. The garden was raided by deer. A sudden summer storm damaged the cabin roof they had just repaired, but there were triumphs too. The mining yielded steady color, and after a month of work, they had enough gold dust to make their first sale in Deadwood. The garden, replanted with better fencing, began to produce vegetables. The cabin became a real home, with curtains Eliza sewed and furniture Cole built. They acquired 3 chickens for eggs and a milk cow for dairy. Through it all, their relationship deepened. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small details that made up a life shared. Eliza discovered that Cole was an early riser who liked his coffee strong and black, that he had a beautiful singing voice he only used when he thought she wasn't listening, that he was patient and methodical in his work, but fierce in his protections of her. Cole learned that Eliza was stronger than she looked, stubborn when challenged, that she had a quick wit and a generous heart, that she mumbled in her sleep and always woke before him despite his early rising habits. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting outside the cabin and watching the stars come out over the black hills. Cole told her stories of his years on the trail, the places he'd been, and the people he'd met. Eliza shared memories of her childhood in Philadelphia, her parents before they died, her aunt who had raised her with strict propriety but genuine love. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked one night, his arm around her shoulders as they sat on the bench he had built outside the cabin door. "Leaving civilization for this rough life?" "Never," Eliza said without hesitation. "Everything I left behind was just things, expectations, a life that never quite fit. This fits. You fit." Cole pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You fit me too. Better than I ever thought anyone could." As summer turned to early fall, they made regular trips to Deadwood to sell their gold and purchase supplies. The town was still rough and chaotic, growing faster than any kind of law or order could manage. But Eliza noticed that people's attitudes toward her had shifted. She was no longer the suspicious stranger who might be an outlaw. She was Cole Brennan's woman, and that carried weight. They ran into Dr. Crane once, outside the assayer's office. The doctor looked at Eliza with surprise, clearly not having expected to see her alive, let alone thriving. "Miss Morgan," he said stiffly, "I see you recovered from your ailment." "No thanks to you," Eliza replied coolly. "But yes, I survived. Cole Brennan saved my life when you refused to even examine me. Dr. Crane had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was protecting my practice. Surely you understand." "I understand that you're a coward who puts reputation over humanity," Eliza said. "And I hope you can live with knowing that if Cole hadn't intervened, you'd have let me die based on nothing but rumor and prejudice." She walked away without waiting for a response, Cole at her side. Once they were out of earshot, Cole squeezed her hand. "Feel better?" "Much." Eliza smiled up at him. "Is it wrong that I enjoyed that?" "Not even a little bit. The man deserved it." They were laughing together as they headed to the general store, and Eliza marveled at how happy she was. Despite the hard work, despite the uncertainty of their future, despite everything, she was genuinely deeply happy. That happiness was tested when winter arrived earlier and harder than expected. By late October, snow was falling in the high country, and the temperatures dropped fast. Cole and Eliza had prepared as best they could, stockpiling firewood and food, but they soon realized they had underestimated how harsh a Black Hills winter could be. The cold was intense, seeping through every crack in the cabin, despite their best efforts at chinkling. The snow fell heavy and deep, making travel to Deadwood impossible for weeks at a time. They were truly isolated, dependent entirely on each other and their preparations. It was during those long winter months that Eliza and Cole's relationship was truly forged. There was nowhere to hide, no escape from the close quarters and the daily challenges. They could have driven each other crazy, could have let the stress fracture what they had built. Instead, they drew closer. Cole taught Eliza to shoot, insisting she needed to be able to defend herself and hunt if something happened to him. Eliza taught Cole to read better than his scattered schooling had allowed, working through the books she'd brought from Philadelphia. They cooked together, sharing the work of keeping the fire going and the meals prepared. They told stories and played cards and made love under piles of blankets while the wind howled outside. There was a night in January when a blizzard hit particularly hard. The wind was so strong it threatened to tear the roof off the cabin, and the cold was bitter enough to freeze water solid within minutes. Cole and Eliza huddled together by the fire, feeding it constantly to keep from freezing. "I was thinking," Cole said during a brief lull in the storm, his arms wrapped around Eliza. "When spring comes, when we can get to town again, maybe we should make this official." "Make what official?" Eliza asked, though her heart was already racing with hope. "Us. This." Cole shifted so he could look at her face, his expression serious. "I want to marry you, Eliza. I want you to be my wife, not just my partner. I want to build a real future together, have children if we're blessed with them, grow old in this cabin we've made into a home." He paused. "I know I don't have much to offer. I'm just a cowboy with some mining skills and a lot of stubbornness. But I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on me." Eliza felt tears spill down her cheeks, warm against her cold skin. "You have everything to offer, Cole. You're good and kind and brave. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it. Of course I'll marry you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Cole kissed her then, deep and passionate, and for a while they forgot about the storm raging outside. They had each other, and that was enough to weather anything. The blizzard finally passed, but they were snowed in for another 3 weeks before the weather cleared, enough to make the journey to Deadwood. When they finally made it to town in late February, it was with a specific mission: to find someone to marry them. Deadwood still had no official church, but there was a circuit preacher who passed through regularly. They were lucky enough to catch him during one of his visits. Reverend Porter was a gruff, practical man who had performed dozens of weddings for miners and settlers. "You sure about this?" he asked, looking from Cole to Eliza. "You two look young yet." "I'm 24, Cole said. "Eliza's 22, we're sure." "Been together long?" "Since July," Eliza said. "We know it's fast, but we've spent months living and working together. We know what we're getting into." Reverend Porter studied them both, then nodded. "All right. You've got the look of people who've made up their minds. Let's do this proper." They were married in Mrs. Patterson's boarding house parlor, with the proprietress and a few of Cole's friends from his wrangling days serving as witnesses. Eliza wore a simple dress she'd made herself from fabric purchased in town, and Cole wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. There were no rings, but Cole had fashioned a necklace from a gold nugget he'd pulled from the mine, hanging it on a leather cord. "This came from our land," he said, as he fastened it around her neck. "From the life we're building together. Seems more meaningful than store-bought gold." Eliza touched the nugget, warm from his hands, and smiled through happy tears. "It's perfect." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Reverend Porter pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed his new bride with such enthusiasm that the witnesses cheered. Mrs. Patterson had prepared a modest celebration meal, and they spent the evening eating and laughing with friends, celebrating the commitment they had made. That night, in the room Mrs. Patterson had prepared for them as a wedding gift, Cole and Eliza consummated their marriage properly for the first time. They'd shared a bed for months, and intimacy was not new between them, but this felt different, sacred. They took their time, exploring each other with new reverence, whispering promises and declarations of love. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the darkness, Eliza felt a peace she'd never known before. She was married, she had a home, she had a partner who loved her, and had proven he would move heaven and earth to protect her. After years of loss and loneliness, she'd found where she belonged. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive," Eliza said. "That night when I stumbled into Deadwood with a fever, burning up and terrified and alone, I thought I was going to die. And maybe I would have, if not for you. You gave me my life back, Cole, and then you gave me so much more." "You gave me just as much," Cole said. "Before you, I was just drifting, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to put down roots, a reason to believe in the future. You made me want to be better, do better. That's worth more than all the gold in the Black Hills." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and in the morning, they began the journey back to their claim, to the home they'd built together and the life that was waiting for them. The rest of that winter was gentler, and when spring finally arrived, it came with a rush of melting snow and budding life. Eliza and Cole threw themselves into work with renewed energy. They expanded the mine, following a promising vein that Cole had uncovered. They enlarged the garden and added a small barn for the cow and horses. They talked about bringing in some cattle, maybe building a larger house in a few years. In May, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but waited to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Cole, he whooped with joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Eliza, we're having a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. Cole placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to be a family, a real family." The pregnancy was not easy. Eliza suffered from morning sickness that lasted all day for the first few months, and the summer heat was oppressive. But Cole was attentive and patient, taking on extra work around the claim so she could rest, bringing her water and cool cloths when she felt ill, rubbing her back and feet when they ached. "You did this for me," he said one evening when she protested that he was doing too much. "That first night, when you were burning with fever and I thought I might lose you. You remember what I did?" "You stayed up all night cooling my burning skin," Eliza said softly. "That's right. And I'd do it 1,000 times over. So let me take care of you now, while you're growing our child. It's the least I can do." Eliza's heart swelled with love for this man, this good, steady, wonderful man who had become her whole world. As her pregnancy progressed, they made preparations for the baby. Cole built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small stars into the sides. Eliza sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were. They discussed names endlessly, though they couldn't agree on anything yet. In January of 1877, with snow falling softly outside and the cabin warm with firelight, Eliza went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Cole was terrified he was going to lose her. But Eliza was strong, stronger than either of them had realized, and just before dawn, she delivered a healthy baby boy with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair. Cole held his son for the first time with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Eliza, he's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Eliza asked, exhausted but glowing with joy. Cole looked down at the baby, then back at his wife. "James," he said, "after your uncle, the man who brought you here, even if he never got to meet you, without him, we never would have found each other." "James Brennan," Eliza tested the name. "I love it." The baby, James, thrived despite being born in the heart of winter. He was a quiet, alert child who seemed content to watch the world around him with serious, dark eyes. Cole was a devoted father, spending hours holding his son and talking to him about everything and nothing. Eliza watched them together and felt her heart overflow with happiness. The years that followed were full of hard work and joy in equal measure. The mine continued to produce steady yields, enough to keep them comfortable, if not wealthy. They expanded their homestead gradually, adding a few head of cattle and improving the cabin until it was genuinely cozy. James grew into a sturdy, curious toddler who loved following his father around and helping with the chores. When James was 2, Eliza became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the fall of 1879, she delivered a daughter with her mother's delicate features and her father's determined expression. They named her Sarah, and she proved to be as strong-willed as she was beautiful. Cole and Eliza's love deepened with each passing year. They still talked for hours in the evenings, still made each other laugh, still found ways to surprise and delight each other. They weathered challenges together, hard winters, a bad mining accident that left Cole with a broken leg, a bout of scarlet fever that swept through Deadwood and had them terrified for their children until the illness passed by their remote claim. Through it all, they remained partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, supported each other's dreams, and built a life that was richer than either of them could have imagined that first night when Cole had stayed up caring for a fevered stranger. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Eliza with a gift, a beautiful dress made of fine fabric, purchased in Deadwood at considerable expense. "Cole, this is too much," Eliza protested, though she was clearly delighted. "We need to save money for the children, for expanding the ranch." "We're doing fine," Cole assured her, "and I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that reminds you that you're not just a miner's wife and a mother. You're also the woman I fell in love with, the woman who's made me the happiest man alive." Eliza kissed him, deep and loving. "I don't need fancy dresses to remember that, but I love it anyway, and I love you, Cole Brennan, more every day." "More every day," Cole agreed. "That's the truth of it. I thought love would level off, reach a plateau, but it just keeps growing, deeper and stronger. You're my whole world, Eliza, you and the kids." They celebrated quietly that evening, with a special meal and time alone, while Mrs. Patterson, who had become a friend and occasional babysitter, watched the children in town. They talked about the past 5 years, marveling at how much had changed, how far they'd come from that desperate first night. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Dr. Crane had agreed to treat me?" Eliza asked. Cole considered the question. "Sometimes. I figure you probably would have recovered, but we might never have really met. I might have just stayed in Deadwood for a few days and then drifted on to the next job. You might have worked your claim alone or sold it and gone back east." He shook his head. "I don't like thinking about that version of the story. I like ours better." "Me too," Eliza said. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. That doctor refusing me was terrible and cruel, but it brought you to me, and I wouldn't change that for anything." By 1880, their homestead was thriving. Cole had largely given up mining in favor of ranching, which proved more sustainable and profitable. They had a small but growing herd of cattle, good grazing land, and a reputation for quality stock. Eliza managed the household and the finances, proving to have a sharp mind for business. Together, they built something solid and lasting. Their family grew once more when Eliza delivered twin boys in the spring of 1881. Daniel and Michael were identical, with blonde hair and green eyes unlike either parent, suggesting some recessive genetic throwback. They were mischievous and energetic, keeping both parents constantly busy. "4 children," Cole said one evening, watching the brood play together in the yard. "We've built quite a family." "Is it too many?" Eliza asked, concerned. Their cabin, though expanded, was feeling crowded. "No," Cole said firmly. "It's perfect. It's everything I never knew I wanted. A full house, children's laughter, you by my side. This is the life I was meant to live. I'm sure of it now." Eliza leaned against him, content. "I'm glad you stayed up that night," she said softly. "Glad you fought to keep me alive. Glad you took a chance on a stranger with a fever and a story that might not have been true." "Best decision I ever made," Cole said, kissing the top of her head, "and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." As Deadwood gradually transformed from a lawless boomtown into a more stable community, Cole and Eliza became respected members of the growing settlement. Cole was known as an honest rancher and a skilled horseman. Eliza, who had started teaching the children of nearby homesteaders in their cabin during winter months, gained a reputation as an educated woman willing to share her knowledge. They occasionally encountered Dr. Crane in town, though he always seemed to find an excuse to avoid them. Eliza felt a certain satisfaction in that. The man who had refused to help her in her darkest hour now had to watch her thrive, had to see the family and life she'd built despite his callousness. One day in 1882, they learned that Dr. Crane was leaving Deadwood, his practice failing, as the town's residents increasingly chose other doctors who had arrived as the settlement grew. Eliza felt no triumph at the news, only a kind of quiet justice. "His reputation caught up with him," Cole observed. "Turns out treating people like they don't matter has consequences." "I hope he learns from it," Eliza said. I hope wherever he goes, he remembers the woman he turned away and chooses differently next time. You're more generous than he deserves, Cole said. Maybe. But holding on to anger would only hurt me. I'd rather be grateful for what his refusal led to. I'd rather focus on everything we have instead of what we almost lost. Cole pulled her close, marveling as he often did at her strength and grace. She'd come west alone and desperate, had nearly died from fever and infection, had faced uncertainty and hardship, and had emerged not bitter but compassionate. She was an extraordinary woman, and he thanked God every day that she was his. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. James grew into a quiet, thoughtful young man who showed interest in his father's ranching work. Sarah proved to be as independent and fierce as her mother, determined to learn everything the boys learned and then some. The twins, Daniel and Michael, were inseparable, communicating in their own language and getting into trouble with alarming regularity, but possessing such charm that it was hard to stay angry with them. Cole and Eliza watched their children grow with pride and occasional bewilderment. They navigated the challenges of parenting together, united in their determination to give their children the stability and love that both of them had lacked for parts of their own childhoods. In 1885, on a warm summer evening, much like the one when they'd first kissed in the cabin on Eliza's claim, Cole and Eliza sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sunset paint the black hills in shades of gold and purple. The children were inside, James reading to his younger siblings, their voices a pleasant murmur in the background. "Hard to believe it's been almost 9 years since we got married," Eliza said. 10 since that first night when you saved my life." "Best decade of my life," Cole said, "and I'm looking forward to the next 10, and the 10 after that, and however many more we get." "Do you ever miss it? The drifting, the freedom of the trail?" Cole shook his head without hesitation. "Not for a second. I thought that was freedom, but it wasn't. It was just emptiness. This is freedom, right here. Choosing to build something with you, choosing to put down roots, choosing love over loneliness. That's real freedom." Eliza took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after years of practice. "I love you, Cole Brennan. I loved you when you stayed up all night cooling my fever. I loved you when you proposed during that blizzard. I loved you the day you held James for the first time, and I love you now, sitting here with our family safe and happy around us. I love you too, Eliza Brennan, forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear Sarah scolding the twins for some mischief, James's patient voice trying to restore order. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect all at once. This was the life they'd built from nothing, from a single act of compassion on a hot July night when a cowboy decided that a fevered stranger deserved help, deserved a chance, deserved to live. Everything good that had followed stemmed from that choice, that moment when Cole Brennan looked at a sick woman and saw someone worth saving. The ranch continued to prosper over the following years. Cole proved to have a talent for breeding quality horses, and soon they were known throughout the territory for their stock. Eliza's informal school grew into a more structured enterprise, with several homesteader families sending their children to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic in the room they had added onto the house specifically for that purpose. By 1890, their eldest son James was 18 and taking on more responsibility for the ranch operations. He'd grown into a fine young man, steady and reliable like his father, with his mother's quick mind and compassion. Sarah, at 16, was already talking about becoming a teacher herself, inspired by watching her mother educate the community's children. The twins, now 9, were finally starting to settle down, channeling their energy into helping with the horses. Cole and Eliza were in their late 30s now, their faces showing the marks of years spent working outdoors, but their love as strong as ever. They'd weathered everything life in the frontier could throw at them. Harsh winters, financial setbacks, childhood illnesses, the occasional conflict with neighbors over water rights or straying cattle. Through it all, they remained united, facing each challenge as partners. One evening in late summer, after a particularly successful sale of horses, Cole surprised Eliza by announcing he'd hired a neighbor's son to help with chores for a few days. "Why?" Eliza asked, puzzled. "Because I'm taking my wife on a trip, just the two of us. The kids are old enough to manage for a few days, and we deserve some time alone." Eliza's eyes widened. Cole Brennan, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, let's go see what's over those mountains we've been staring at for 14 years. Let's sleep under the stars and remember what it's like to be just us, without children and responsibilities. Let's have an adventure. Eliza laughed, delighted. Yes, absolutely yes. They set out 3 days later, riding into the high country with nothing but bedrolls and supplies for a week. It was like being young again, just the two of them against the world. They talked and laughed and made love under the vast western sky. They remembered the early days of their relationship, when everything was new and uncertain, but full of possibility. I never thanked you properly, Eliza said one night as they lay by their campfire, stars wheeling overhead. For what? For seeing me? That first night when I was at my worst, burning with fever and terrified and alone. You could have walked away. You could have believed the rumors about me being an outlaw, but you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. That changed everything. Cole pulled her closer. You were worth saving, are worth everything. And I didn't do it looking for thanks, Eliza. I did it because it was right, and because something in me recognized something in you. Like we were meant to find each other. Do you believe that? That we were meant to be? I do, Cole said simply. Call it fate or providence or just dumb luck. But yeah, I think we were meant to find each other. Think about all the things that had to happen for us to meet. Your uncle dying and leaving you that claim, the stagecoach being robbed, you making it to Deadwood despite your injuries, me being in town at exactly the right time, Mrs. Patterson telling me about you. Any one of those things goes differently and we never cross paths. That's got to mean something. Eliza thought about the chain of events, the unlikely sequence that had brought them together. Maybe you're right. Maybe some things are just meant to be. They returned from their trip refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. And what came next was growth, both for their family and their community. Deadwood was no longer the wild boomtown it had been in 1876. It had a real government now, schools, churches, law, and order. The Brennan Ranch was part of that growth, a stable, successful enterprise that employed several hands and contributed to the local economy. In 1892, Sarah left home to attend a teaching college in Denver, determined to get formal training for the career she wanted. It was hard for Eliza and Cole to watch their daughter leave, but they were proud of her determination and independence. She gets that from you, Cole told Eliza the night after Sarah departed. That strength, that refusal to let the world tell her what she can't do. She gets it from both of us, Eliza corrected. We raised her to believe she could do anything. Now we get to watch her prove it. James announced his engagement in 1893 to a sweet young woman named Mary, whose family had a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at the Brennan Ranch, with half the county in attendance. Watching her son marry, Eliza remembered her own wedding in Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, simple but profound. She hoped James and Mary would find even half the happiness she and Cole had found. The twins eventually went their separate ways, Daniel showing interest in the new railroad industry, and Michael deciding to try his hand at law. But they all returned regularly to the ranch, to the home their parents had built, drawn back by the warmth and love that had always characterized the Brennan household. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Cole and Eliza celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from across the territory. It was a joyous occasion, full of laughter and music and memories. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had departed, Eliza and Cole slipped away to sit by the creek, the same creek where they had first evaluated the mining claims 24 years earlier. 25 years, Eliza marveled. A quarter of a century. Best 25 years of my life, Cole said. And you know what? I still remember that first night like it was yesterday. Walking into that boarding house room and seeing you there, burning with fever. Being scared you might die before morning. Deciding I was going to do everything in my power to keep you alive. I remember your hands, Eliza said softly. Cool cloths on my forehead, your voice in the darkness telling me to hold on. I was so delirious, but I knew someone was fighting for me. I knew I wasn't alone. You've never been alone since, Cole said, and you never will be, as long as I have breath in my body. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the creek burble over stones, the same sound that had been there when they first arrived and would be there long after they were gone. They'd built something lasting here, something that would endure through their children and grandchildren. "Do you have any regrets?" Eliza asked. Cole considered the question seriously. "I regret that the doctor wouldn't help you, that you had to suffer unnecessarily. I regret we couldn't do more to challenge the injustices we saw, especially against the Lakota whose land this was. I regret the times I was too stubborn or too proud, the times I could have been a better husband or father." He paused. "But regret us? Regret the life we built? Never. Not for a single second." "Me neither," Eliza said. "Even the hard parts, even the times we struggled. It was all worth it because we faced it together." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, and Eliza couldn't help but think about the woman she'd been when she first arrived in Deadwood. Scared, alone, burning with fever, rejected by the one person who should have helped her. That woman could never have imagined this life, this family, this deep and abiding love. But that woman had been saved by a cowboy with a good heart and steady hands, who stayed up all night cooling her burning skin and gave her a reason to live. Everything else had flowed from that one act of compassion. The years continued to pass, each one a gift. Cole and Eliza grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lined, but their love as strong as ever. They became grandparents multiple times over, delighting in the next generation of Brennans. They watched the territory become a state, watched automobiles gradually replace horses, watched the world change in ways they could never have imagined. Through it all, they remained each other's constants. They still talked for hours, still made each other laugh, still found ways to surprise each other. On summer evenings, they still sat outside and watched the sunset over the Black Hills, remembering the journey that had brought them there. In 1910, on a warm July afternoon, much like the one when Eliza had first stumbled into Deadwood, they sat together on the porch of their home, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had gathered for a family celebration. They were in their 60s now, still active but slowing down, beginning to think about the legacy they would leave behind. "Tell us the story," one of the grandchildren demanded, a little girl with Eliza's eyes. "Tell us how you met." It was a story the grandchildren never tired of hearing, and Eliza and Cole never tired of telling. They took turns with the narrative, each filling in details the other missed, their voices blending together as they recounted the tale that had become family legend. They told about the stagecoach robbery, the doctor who refused to help, the cowboy who stayed up all night fighting to bring down a fever. They told about the mining claim and the hard first winter and the proposal during a blizzard. They told about building a life from nothing, about love that grew stronger with each passing year. "So the doctor was mean?" the little girl asked when they finished. "He was afraid," Eliza said gently. "Afraid of making a mistake, afraid of risking his reputation. Fear makes people do unkind things sometimes." "But Grandpa was brave," the girl said. "He helped, even though he was scared." Cole smiled. "I was terrified. But your grandmother needed help, and I couldn't walk away from that. Best decision I ever made." "The best," Eliza agreed, taking his hand. "The very best." As the afternoon faded into evening and the family dispersed, Cole and Eliza remained on the porch, watching the familiar sunset paint the sky. They were old now, their time together finite in a way they'd been too young to fully appreciate decades ago. But they'd lived well, loved deeply, and built something beautiful together. "No regrets?" Cole asked, echoing the question from years before. "No regrets," Eliza confirmed. "Only gratitude, for every day, every moment, for you. For us," Cole corrected. "We did this together." They sat hand in hand as darkness fell, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. A life that began with a simple act of compassion, with a cowboy who stayed up all night cooling a stranger's burning skin, and grew into a love story that would be told and retold by generations to come. It was a good story, a true story, and most importantly, it was theirs. Every hard-won moment, every triumph and setback, every laugh and tear and kiss, they'd lived it together, and they would end it together, whenever that time came, secure in the knowledge that they'd made the most of the precious gift they'd been given. The night settled around them, full of cricket song and the whisper of wind through pine trees, and Cole and Eliza Brennan sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, blessed beyond measure, by a love that had begun with one cowboy's decision to help a fevered stranger in need. Years later, when Eliza was 72 and Cole was 74, they still lived on the ranch, though their son James managed most of the operations now. They spent their days in quiet contentment, tending a small garden, playing with great-grandchildren, and enjoying each other's company. One summer evening, after a particularly hot day, Eliza felt unwell. Nothing serious, she insisted, just a little overheated from working in the garden. But as night fell, a familiar fever began to rise. Cole recognized it immediately. He settled Eliza in their bed, the same bed they had shared for decades, and began the familiar ritual: cool cloths, fresh water, constant attention. He stayed up through the night just as he had 50 years before, cooling her burning skin, holding her hand, refusing to leave her side. "Cole," Eliza whispered in the darkness, "you don't have to do this. We should get the doctor." "I'm staying," Cole said firmly. "Just like I did that first night. I took care of you then. I'll take care of you now." "That was different. We were young. You're 74 years old. You need to rest." "I'll rest when you're better," Cole said, replacing the cloth on her forehead with a freshly cooled one. "Not before." Eliza smiled despite her fever. "Still my stubborn cowboy." "Always." The fever passed by morning, just a brief illness rather than anything serious. But the night reminded them both of where they'd started, the foundation of everything they'd built together. 50 years, Eliza said, as Cole helped her sit up to drink some water. 50 years since you first did this for me. "And I'd do it 50 more, Cole said. 50 times 50. Whatever it takes, Eliza. I meant those vows, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. I meant every word. I know you did. You've proven it every single day." They lived several more years, growing older but never apart. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1927, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who numbered in the dozens. The celebration was held on the ranch, on the same land where Eliza's uncle had once panned for gold, where she and Cole had built their first home together. In his speech at the celebration, James told the story of his parents' meeting, the story that had become family mythology. He spoke of the doctor who refused to help, the cowboy who stayed up all night, the love that had grown from one act of compassion. "My parents taught us that love isn't just a feeling," James said to the assembled crowd. "It's a choice you make every day, a choice to stay, to help, to put someone else's needs before your own. My father made that choice on a hot July night in 1876, when he decided to help a fevered stranger. And he made that choice again every day for the next 50 years. That's what we're really celebrating today. Not just 50 years of marriage, but 50 years of choosing love over and over again." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd when he finished. Cole and Eliza stood together, aged but still vital, still holding hands, still looking at each other with the same love that had sustained them through 5 decades. "Thank you," Eliza said to all assembled, "for being part of our story, for being part of the family we built from nothing. Cole and I came to this land with nothing but hope and determination. Look what we made together. Look at all of you. This is our legacy, and we couldn't be prouder. Or more grateful," Cole added. "Every day with Eliza has been a gift. Every day with all of you has been a blessing. We've lived a good life, a full life, and we still have more living to do." They did have more living to do. 3 more years, as it turned out. Years filled with quiet contentment, surrounded by family, enjoying the sunset years of a life lived to its fullest. Cole passed first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 77, Eliza beside him. She held his hand as he drifted away, and her grief was profound but not bitter. They'd had 53 years together, half a century of partnership and love. It was more than most people ever got, and she was grateful for every moment. Eliza lived another year, a year spent telling stories to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure the family history would be preserved. She told them about Philadelphia and the journey west. She told them about the stagecoach robbery and the cruel doctor. She told them about the cowboy with kind eyes who saved her life. "Love is a choice," she told them, echoing her son's words. "Your grandfather chose to help a stranger, and that choice changed everything. Remember that. Remember that kindness matters, that compassion matters, that one person's decision to help can change the entire course of a life." She passed in her sleep one warm July night, exactly 54 years after she'd first arrived in Deadwood, burning with fever. Her children found her in the morning, peaceful and still, finally reunited with the man she'd loved for more than half a century. They buried her next to Cole, on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The funeral drew hundreds of people, testament to the impact they had had on their community. Person after person shared stories of the Brennans' kindness, their generosity, their unwavering commitment to each other and their family. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations. The story of Cole and Eliza was never forgotten. It was told and retold, becoming a family legend, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring strength of love. In the end, their story was simple but profound. A woman arrived in a harsh land, desperate and alone. A man chose to help when no one else would. From that single act of compassion grew a love that lasted a lifetime, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. It was a story of the American West, of hardship and perseverance, of injustice and compassion. But more than that, it was a love story. The story of a town doctor who refused to treat her fever, and a cowboy who stayed up all night cooling her burning skin, and the beautiful life they built together from that single, fateful night. And in the hearts of their descendants, who gathered each year on the anniversary of that July night to remember the beginning of it all, Cole and Eliza Brennan's love lived on, as timeless and enduring as the Black Hills themselves. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the simplest acts of human kindness, and that true love, once found, never really ends.